Hello and welcome to the Light Reading Booth Studio in Nashville at the Fiber Connect 2022 conference. My name is Phil Harvey, and joining me are my guests and comrades, let's say, Kelsey Zeiser, editor at Light Reading, and Mari Silbey, former editor at Light Reading, but now works at US Ignite. And I can't remember your title again.
I just go with senior director because it's nice and concise.
There we go. Well, she's a substitute editor so that we have a fuller panel, and we're here to recap what we've seen and heard so far at the Fiber Broadband Conference, Fiber Connect Conference, that's put on by the Fiber Broadband Association. You can see why I'm not putting all the words in the right order. So, Mari, do you want to kick us off since you're our substitute guest editor and you're actually running panels during the show? So
yeah, so they tell me.
Go ahead and tell us what you're talking about. I know that one of the big themes here is the state and local governments trying to sort of figure out how to work together in order to get more broadband to more people. Am I in the ballpark?
Yeah, well, shockingly, there's a lot of money that's coming from the federal government, and that is leading a lot of people to want to be at shows like the Fiber Broadband Association because they see great opportunities to bring in some of that money for their own purposes to deploy fiber in communities and through the coordination with the state broadband offices. But you know, one of the things that we're hearing, and I've heard this before this show, and it was definitely re-emphasized here, is there's concern among the communities that the state broadband offices are going to take their concerns and their strategic recommendations for deployment seriously, that they will understand what needs to happen at the local level and not just be looking at it from the state level and from the fire hose of information that the poor state broadband offices are getting at this point. And it's a combination of the state broadband offices do not really have the people capacity to do all of the things they need to do to get this money out to the communities where we need to connect the unconnected.
Right.
And then it's also, unsurprisingly, there's regulatory issues at play. There's, places where state broadband offices or the states in general have laws about how, whether or not municipalities can actually be in the business of deploying fiber. And so there's concern about, where do you draw those lines, who makes those decisions, whether there's going to be lawsuits before and after the fact. So it could get very messy before it gets clean.
Yeah, it seems like all the equipment vendors, the state agency folks that we've talked to during the show they're optimistic, but they have expressed concerns about this sort of new way of working and whether or not they're ready for it. We really won't know until the money starts flowing.
Right.
So.
And one of the things that NTIA is doing as they're giving out this money is they are supposed to have a liaison with each of the state broadband offices. And they are supposed to be, some of the ones that are helping to encourage the collaboration and communication with the local governments and municipalities. So that's the way it's supposed to play out. How well it works in practice, we'll just have to wait and see.
Okay, cross our fingers. Kelsey, you were saying that 1 gig is the new normal. I don't know what you're talking about. Tell me more.
Well, Julie Kunzler and Jamie Lenderman with Omdia released a report recently about the kind of skyrocketing rise of interest and deployment of 1 gig services. And they outlined, kind of 4 reasons for drivers for that increase, talking about advertisements that consumers are seeing, and even if they aren't using a gig, they still want it, which is understandable. It's that shiny new thing. And just new opportunities for service providers and how one of the drivers for them is just the competition out there. And then Julie and I also talked about some of the challenges that that cable companies are also facing, the hybrid fiber coax companies in trying to upgrade and compete with the telcos and delivering fiber broadband services.
Yeah, there's quite a few cable companies that have either started deploying fiber exclusively, or and kind of migrating their plant, or they've doing a bit of both at the same time and maybe trying to integrate them, which sounds dicey.
Yes.
Can I add to that? I heard some anecdotes about some of the, not usually the largest of the cable operators, but many of the smaller cable players that are looking at this money as an opportunity to, yes, switch over from having, mixed plant of DOCSIS and also fiber to, gosh, let's deploy all fiber because that's going to be easier from an operational standpoint. And it looks like we're going to have the money for the CapEx to be able to do that, which is fascinating. I mean, it's an overbuild. It's essentially, potentially going to fund some overbuilding.
Yeah, and it changes the nature, of not just the competition, but actually what these companies are capable of offering once they get those new networks into place. Some of the things I enjoy talking to some of the electrical cooperatives who have traditionally not been in the broadband business, and now they're building fiber networks to reach underserved communities in their electrical footprint. And one of the gentlemen I interviewed was from Craighead Electrical Cooperative in northern Arkansas, was talking about the fact that once they started building out the rest of their network in the middle mile, they start cooperating with other Arkansas electrical cooperatives and combining efforts to not just save themselves some money, but also to kind of set up a wholesale network across the state. And it's interesting because it provides efficiencies for their business, enables them to lower the cost of bandwidth all the way through, but on a brand new network. But it also provides some much needed competition, across the space, and that's something I think our audience is very interested in as well. When the competition heats up and when the price goes down for bandwidth, and then the race to reach people is. There's not just a race to get more customers, but there's also a race to connect the underserved areas, because they could be customers for life if you do things the right way.
I'll be really interested to watch. I mean, everybody's focus is really on the $45 billion coming out of the BEAD program portion of the large federal grant that's federal grant money that's coming out. But I'll be really interested in watching also the much, much smaller amount of money that's going through the middle mile program.
Yeah.
Just to see what that does in terms of, attracting last mile providers to places that haven't been attractive from an economic standpoint before. Yeah.
And I think it also, the stronger middle mile not only enables those, companies like electric cooperatives, but also, it provides the on-ramp to do more fixed wireless service in some of those areas as well, which is kind of interesting.
I was talking to Toronto Wireless earlier about their G1 platform, their fixed wireless access that we talked about on the podcast recently.
Yeah.
And they were saying, we realize this is a fiber conference, but one of the things that they can do is kind of come in during those, or as a precursor to some of those fiber builds offering FWA while regions are getting prepped for fiber. And back to your point on competition, I went to a public-private partnership panel, and one of the audience members asked Google, say that 5 times.
Public-private partnership panel.
Tongue twister.
That was impressive.
Nailed it. But in the Q&A, one of the questions to Google Fiber was, are you concerned about competition doing open access programs? And they're like, no, we welcome the competition. And so that was an interesting discussion as well.
Yeah. Any other show highlights? Any things you guys saw that stood out, or things you missed that you should have seen?
Well, I mean, it's interesting that, Kelsey, you brought up the fixed wireless, because again, there is so much, hype and noise around fiber deployments. Obviously at the Fiber Broadband Association show, but the question is going to be, how are the states going to figure out what is really economically feasible with the money that they're getting, and the maps that they haven't yet seen about where the underserved communities are, and how do you make those determinations where fiber makes sense, or we have to wait for fiber because there has to be an incremental step. I think that's still to be determined. But I think more interesting than any of that really is all of the swag that Kelsey collected from the show floor. So if you want to talk about highlights from the show, I would say that's really the highlight.
Bags and bags of it.
Bags of
she's
swag.
just going to dump it out here. Oh, this is great. Show and tell time.
I might have a problem.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, a
I
little
mean,
bit.
this was just one trip around the show floor. Let's be honest. Like, she's been busy, and then suddenly.
Listen, we ran out of pen budget, so I have
Right.
to stock up on
Right.
that. And
Well,
notebooks.
yeah, pen, paper, T-shirts, squeezy things,
the pork
Miami
really cool
splice.
coasters. What
Pork
else do we
fried
have?
splice.
Miami Splice.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
so clever. It
Yeah.
makes my head hurt. Okay.
Little TiVo.
I think this is a good place to leave it because we have some cleaning up to do and possibly it's happy hour, so we should get out of here.
Nice.
Thank you for watching. On behalf of Kelsey Zeiser and Mari Silbey, this is Phil Harvey saying goodbye. Goodbye.